Hello, this is Susan, and today I'm going to show you a flip through of my sewing journals that I just finished. I've wanted to make a sewing journal for a very long time, and I've been saving all of my vintage sewing packages to make the ephemera and so on. Everything in these journals is vintage, absolutely everything, from the lace, the ribbon, the fabric pieces, the vintage embroidered pieces, the buttons, the ribbons, lace, absolutely everything. And so I'm really excited about this. I've been sewing since I was probably 8 or 10 when my mom showed me how. And I've always made my clothes in high school. I've made quilts, and I've always saved all of my packaging for the sewing notions and whatnot. And so I just knew I just had to create this. And I found this book that was just gorgeous, and it was a vintage sewing book from the mid 1940s, and I wanted to use that as my base. So I got to the work of gutting it, and it has the most beautiful eggplant cover. And so I didn't really want to cover that up, so I just covered some of the areas with vintage pattern pieces and put doilies on it for pockets and so on. So even the ribbon that it's tied up in is vintage. I put little bits of sewing ephemera, little charms on the buttons. There's just tons of buttons in these journals. This is a very old mother of pearl pink. They were dyed, hand dyed. And so I just made some pockets, put some little ephemera in it for lots of writing space. Made a little flip tag with a piece of vintage embroidery. The new Encyclopedia of Modern Sewing. And so as you can see, I put the little bit of pattern piece on, and then the doilies for the pocket. It's actually a double pocket there. Okay, so here we are on the inside. And for the inside pockets, I also used the patterns and made a little booklet. It says "So Sweet." A day spent sewing is a good day. I did tons and tons of layering on each of the pages, from stenciling, stamping, little pieces of pattern bits, and so on, as you'll see throughout each page. This little, "You Had Me in Stitches." This was a piece of transfer paper that it came in a little package, and you could transfer the images onto your fabric and do some embroidery. And on this side, I took a vintage Holly Hobby pattern and made it into a pocket. And then from the same pattern, I made a little booklet with lots of journaling space, stamping, some sewing stories. The papers that I used, I tea-dyed them. I also used, let me see, what's the word I'm looking for? Avocado dyed some of the papers that are pink, and I also used Easter egg dye on some of the pages and on some of the lace. So here, for example, was some vintage lace that I used with the Easter egg dye. I thought it turned out so pretty, the ombre, I just dipped it. And this was a package, or this was actually an envelope that you would send in for something. And all I had was just the back part of it, and I thought that turned out to be such a cool pocket. Tons of writing space. Here I used a little piece of the bias tape, packaging, and just for a little tuck spot. And this orange and yellow, that was more dyeing from the Easter egg dye. A little iron charm. I found this sweet little peach button that matched so perfectly, and I attached it onto a vintage dresser scarf, and then I put that little piece of embroidery stitching. And this was also some of the Easter egg dye. May your bobbin always be full. These were so fun to make. I went and found some vintage patterns and I reduced them. And then what I tried to do was pick out the colors that went with each of the dresses or whatever, and did it that way. Put that lace on to sort of coordinate. And writing space. This journal, well, all of these journals that I made are so full of threads and sewing. If you don't like the threads, you can clip them off. But I really thought it gave it such a fun touch. Queen of Sewing, and this actually is an altered paper clip. Imagine it, then create it. Little thread. Another seam binding package for a corner tuck, and then I just used some vintage fabric and made a little tiny booklet. I just love the prices on all of these, 45 cents for that package of seam binding. And that was one of the more expensive ones. And here is a piece of ephemera that had the hooks and eyes with just a few left on, and I thought it was so fun to make into a tag. I did do some gesso, and I put some color in some of it for more writing space. A clean house is a sign of a broken sewing machine. Too funny. And here what I did was I used the flap of a pattern, and I made a little flip. And so I tried to coordinate the fabrics, like I said, with the pictures. And so she's got a striped peplum skirt, and so I put a striped piece of vintage fabric on that. So beautiful. Lots of buttons. The second signature has this really pretty, I just love this color, this magenta, and it goes so well with the eggplant cover. Just bobbing along. Here's some more stretch lace seam binding that I used for a little pocket. Create with fabric. Needles and pins, more gesso for writing space. A little net pocket hanging on by a thread. And this was part of a zipper package that I just made into a long tag. Beautiful things come together, one stitch at a time. Very vintage trim from the, gosh, maybe 60s. More buttons to coordinate. A stitch in time saves 9. Okay, and here is more of the transfer pattern, and this was to actually make your day of the week towels. Those were always so fun, and this was 15 cents. So this was the packaging, and I just cut it apart to make it into a page. And thread, and this was actually authentic, where it says the sewing ideas, and it was part of a packaging. Maxi piping, that was some yellow, so I put the yellow piping around the page, and then this was actually a package from the needles, and I made that into a tag. You had me in stitches. Here's the inside fold of the second signature, and such lovely ladies. We are fearless, independent, and original. I just love their dresses from the 60s. And this is so beautiful. Little tag. Start doing things you love. These dresses look definitely from the 50s. Simplicity pattern. And this trident was the end of the top of the spool. That was the brand name of the thread, Trident. I put some old postage stamps. That's fun. Vogue pattern. And I left all these because I thought it was really neat where it had all of the cutting information. Just some more writing space. This is actually an envelope that I made, and this was just a business envelope that I received in the mail, and it had the big window, and I thought this would be really fun to make into something like this. And so this actually was a white applique, and I did all the stitching and all the beading to give it some color because I love the pink with it. More writing space, and that was from that transfer pattern. Here is the back of a pattern envelope, and I just cut it in half diagonally to make a tuck spot. And then here was another piece of fun old, just a digital that I found, needles, thread, and scissors. Sometimes a girl's just gotta sew. She's so cute. She's a little Cupid doll. More writing space. And this was avocado dyed paper. Another little sewing charm that is a ball of yarn and some needles. An old pattern from a men's pajamas. Life's a Stitch. All of these fabrics, as I mentioned earlier, are all vintage. And this one was some of the old vintage fabric that I dyed with the Easter egg colors. And I just thought those dresses were so pretty. More writing space. And the other half of the pattern envelope, I'd rather be sewing, and journaling space. And this is the back. And I'm working on my sewing PhD. Projects half done. Boy, isn't that the truth. With writing space. And there's the back. So since I was having so much fun making all of the pages and the ephemera, I just got carried away. And like I said, I did not want an alligator mouse. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to make a second one. So I found a book that was about the same size and the same depth of the spine, and I used this one with this pretty green. I did the same thing with the pattern pieces and the little pockets with the fabric and so on. And this one was really, I thought, really super fun. It was a little button card, and I put some vintage buttons on the man's shirt. And there's writing space on both of those. Little sewing scissors charm, lots of buttons. On the inside, oops, don't have anything. I might have put something in there. The New Encyclopedia of Modern Sewing. It was from 1948. This is more pages from the other book. So I kind of went with a green theme on this one, and this one is this crazy sewing lady. And I just made a collage tuck. This was really super fun to make, this little lady. Any day spent sewing is a good day. So I just used the top bodice, and then I folded pattern piece for her skirt and just put some lace on. And I gave her a necklace and a bracelet. I mean a belt. I turn thread and paper into journals. What's your superpower? Funny. And here's a little sewing charm that is a tape measure. Make, do, and mend. Just flip out. And another end of a thread spool. Avocado dyed paper. And this was another pattern transfer envelope. And this is an altered paper clip. And on the back, I used a piece of the sewing ephemera from the trim text. Oops. This is my happy place. I'll flip over. I did some more gesso with color for writing, and a flip page with fabric, all vintage fabrics used, vintage buttons. Measure twice, cut once. Just a little piece of sewing, a few pattern notes. I was sewing when sewing wasn't cool. Fun. All the different scissors. Another little fabric flip. The other side of the transfer envelope. More writing space. Another envelope flip. Fabric flip. A few pattern notes. Sew a straight seam. That was what was kind of getting started in the book. Sewing is my love language. Here I used vintage ribbon and made a pocket, and then I made a little notebook for writing. Journaling space. And this is the end of the first signature. A vintage button card that I put some paper on the back for journaling and more journaling space, and a cute little booklet, cute as a button. Love the girls. And here's just a little card. It's just fabric, flips, and just vintage fun stuff. And on this side, I love this peachy color and the blue. Just a little envelope or a little pocket with journaling space. More gesso for writing. On pins and needles. Here's the transfer pattern again. You can write on that. You can writing space on this pattern. Bias tape. I put some around the edges with a really super old piece of lace there. More writing space. This was a really, really fun old embroidered doily scarf. It had some spots, so I just cut around those and put it in for fun. I love the colors on this. Beautiful. And there's a little flip. You're the sharpest pin in the cushion. Just a woman who loves sewing, and I just gathered up some pattern piece and made a little ruffle. This was a super, super old heart. This was from Hallmark, a package from Hallmark of these hearts, and I just folded it in half and clipped it onto the edge. A little sewing charm, sewing machine. Sheer delight. I'm so awesome. Funny. On pins and needles. Some more journaling space. Sewing mends the soul. More journaling there and here. This is an envelope that I made, and I just clipped onto the edge of the page. So much fabric, so little time, so you can actually use the envelope. And on the inside, I made a pocket here, and I just put a little card for more journaling space. Hanging on by a thread, more journaling space. I love this peach also. I'll pull it down this way. An old dress form, sewing is life. Oh, there's again, a clean house is a sign of a broken machine. So happy. Cute tuck spot. There's the other half of that embroidered doily. Gessoed paper for writing. Sewing soothes the soul. Another bias tape. Corner pocket. Sewing forever. Housework whenever. Sewing is therapy. A little pocket made from the zipper. This was also the zipper insert, as you can see. And then I just put a little lace flip over the illustrations. And there's the back. Needle and thread. and that's the second one. Well, then I still had extra left over, so I had to make a third one, which is this one. And so I found another book, approximately the same size, more vintage ribbon, tying it shut, and I did the same thing. I put pattern pieces on, covering the book title, because this wasn't a sewing book. And I made more ephemera for the pockets, so hanging on by a thread. Very old snaps on just a little piece of the paper, cardboard. Little sewing machine, a pocket. I found this old doily, and I thought it was really worked out great. So I threaded some old, I don't know what it really was, but I threaded it through there, and I just thought it turned out so pretty. Little scissors charm, sewing machine charm, and it's got pockets from either way. And on this one, I put the work basket, the old needle books, and this was from April 1950. And so when I had these little images, I always tried to find fabric that would match like what was shown. And I thought I did a pretty good job on that. That was so fun. These are so fun to make. And 3 yards for 5 cents. I think this was an elastic package. And just a little envelope that I used up front. And again, I used the pattern pieces for the pockets. And this was just a journaling card. Beautiful, ladies, beautiful patterns. I'd rather be sewing. And I used some of the pattern for a ruffle, and I made that into a pocket. So there's just writing space. And in the pocket, I also put an envelope with a pocket there. Happiness is a full bobbin, and then a little journaling card inside. Do what you love. Lots of writing space. The work basket, this was from October 1950, this little book. And so it begins. This was just a wee little corner that I just put on for a little flip. And another work basket, which is a little tuck spot underneath. This was from July 1948. This actually is vintage feed sack material, this blue. That's so pretty. And here was just kind of like one of those pockets that you can make 4 different pockets out of. You fold a piece of paper. And so I just made a little journaling booklet, tag. Oops, another tag, another tag. I'm itching to be stitching. And so you've got your 4 different pockets there. Flip down. Woven ribbon. 5 feet for 80 cents, but then they marked it down to 15 cents. How fun. Wish we could find prices like that on Sewing Notions these days. A very, very old mother of pearl button that's carved. You can't buy happiness, but you can buy fabric. More gesso, colored gesso for writing. Happiness is a full bobbin. This was just one little piece left of a very vintage doily that I just had to make some stitches to hold it together, but I thought it was fun for a little color. Avocado dyed paper, Pfaff sewing machine, and so on. Pfaff is the brand name of the sewing machine that my mom had. So when I found this old piece of a digital, I just had to use that in honor of my mom. A little flip. Notes, and here's a little sewing charm of tape measure. Second signature. Oh, I have an envelope to put in here too. And here's more of the vintage, vintage fabric that was, word escapes me. Feed sack fabric from probably the 40s. And here, this was just the coolest thing. I just had to include this. So it was, as you can see, snap fasteners, like for making little children's clothing, and I just sewed it onto paper for making a journal card and just tucked it in there. More avocado dyed paper hanging on by a thread, the net pocket. I only sew on days that end with Y. Me too. Women Who Make Sense. This is from the Vintage Work Basket magazine. And tracing paper and gesso. I love to create little tiny pocket. I flip open. Love their dresses, and I thought this fabric went well. It could have been used for that dress. And then another little tag that I thought was so fun. I loved her dress. She was definitely late 60s. From Vogue, Collect Beautiful Moments. Journaling tag, another flip. Sewing Soothes the Soul, and more of that, probably from 1960s trim. So many ideas, so little time. More of the vintage feed sack fabric. Sewing Mends the Soul. Flip that way, and flips that way. Notes, just a little bit of stamping. And this is actually an altered paper clip, and this was just a small strip of buttons that were all sewn together. And then I thought this was a perfect match to this, and making a tag for journaling. Stitch. This was also feed sack fabric. And I made this large journaling tag. One stitch at a time. And we're at the back. Stitches. And there we are. 3 sewing journals when I was really only intending to make one. But oh well, I was having so much fun. And all 3 of these will be available, and I'll put all the information in the description box. If you're interested in purchasing one, you can just let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.